Hello and welcome back to another FPL team selection. Today we're going to go over my transfer plans for this week and the reasoning as to why I might be making those transfers. We're also going to look at the best fixtures for this week and until the end of the season to determine who could be some of the better transfers that you could potentially make for your team. First of all, we are going to look at my team for last week, which only scored 42 points. It was a very, very low average week with an average of 41. So we did beat it by 1 point, but again it was a small red arrow for me. I think I dropped about 20,000 places, mainly I think being the captaincy being the biggest letdown in Marmoush. It was a big open week for captains and I ended up going for the best according to the stats, which is obviously the video that we do every single week, and picking Marmoush, who didn't really do too well, only a 2-pointer for him. If I'd went differential, Bowen would have been a nice option, Isak another nice option. I was very tempted to go in defence to an O'Brien or Vardiol. O'Brien was awful, never picking up that clean sheet against Leicester, which wasn't great. And so he's really only in the team now for that Southampton match in game week 37, so we'll see how that goes. Again, ideally, probably would have saved the transfer, but again, in hindsight, I would have still expected that clean sheet from Everton. I was actually very close to doubling up on them as well, so I guess I've kind of had a little bit of a let off there. I was supposed to do Mateta to Wisa last week, ended up not doing it because of the potential double game week with Spurs and Aston Villa. Again, Spurs requested their game to be moved in the case that they made the Europa League final, so I wanted to wait and see if there was going to be any more information on that, and then I probably would have brought in someone like Ollie Watkins this week instead of Wisa, but there was no announcement. The game just got moved from Sunday to Friday, so there is nothing there, and you will see why that is a little bit of a problem when we do look at our transfers for this week. Now, the big talk this week is the return of Erling Haaland. It looks as though he is going to be ready to start against Southampton, which is of course one of the best fixtures that anyone can have in the Premier League this season. Now, I am very, very tempted to go here with Erling Haaland. Obviously, with my rank at 450k, I need to start making some big moves, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be able to move to Haaland. I don't think there's a lot of transfers available, and obviously Haaland is going to require one or two hits if you really want to try and get him in. So it is definitely something that I'm considering this week. It is going to be a problem for Omar Marmoush as well, because obviously he has been playing in Haaland's position while he has been out injured, so he could potentially move out to the left or just be benched altogether. Now, I went back and looked at Erling Haaland's most recent Premier League games, and the last time I saw him was game week 29 against Brighton, so I really wanted to see what was happening with Marmoush when Haaland was on the pitch. Now, in game week 29, which was all the way back to the 15th of March now, so it has been a while, Haaland started up front and Marmoush started behind him and played 86 minutes and scored as well. But of course, Kevin De Bruyne is back now as well, so Marmoush isn't going to be able to play in De Bruyne's position either, so that does rule out centre attack and mid for Marmoush for that week. Game week 28, looking back on it, Haaland obviously started at striker again and Marmoush was on the bench. He came on for Savinho at right wing with 20 minutes to go, so obviously a big minutes risk there if De Bruyne is going to be playing for one, and of course Haaland playing at striker. If he's going to be playing on the wing, we know how much the Manchester City wingers can be rotated, so it is something to keep in mind. In game week 27, again Haaland starting up front, and again Marmoush started in centre attack and mid just behind him, again Kevin De Bruyne's position. Now, that's 3 games now where Marmoush isn't going to be able to fit in that squad. But when we go back to game week 25, that is where Marmoush scored his hat-trick against Newcastle, and he did play at left wing, which I think is kind of his natural position, so I think that is most likely where he does move into with De Bruyne and Haaland in the team. I do think he plays left wing, and of course he does. Last time he did play there, he picked up a hat-trick against Newcastle as well, who are a pretty decent defence. So that is something that you do have to consider. I don't think his minutes are going to be as secure as they have been now that Haaland is back, but he is still going to be a dangerous player to have. Again, the likes of Phil Foden and Savinho have still been popular picks despite being minutes risks, and I think Marmoush has a good chance of starting at left wing this week. The only thing as well though is his form hasn't been too great as of recent weeks, as we have seen, captaining him, out 2 in the last 3 weeks. So he could easily be dropped as well now that Haaland's back, but I do think Haaland is going to be someone who could be managed for minutes this week, against Southampton. They are probably expected to, do well without Haaland, but that means we could potentially see Marmoush, move into striker or even start at striker, depending on whether Haaland starts the game or not. So that is just something to consider with Marmoush. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to sell him before Southampton. I think even if he does come off the bench, he's very capable of getting a goal and at least some points in that match. So maybe it's not something to worry about until maybe game week 37, but it is just something that you are going to have to keep in mind now that Erling Haaland is back. Now for fixtures this week, there isn't actually too many good fixtures. We've only got 4 green fixtures on the FDR this week, and that's Man City, Nottingham Forest, Brentford and Man United. Now there is a few players in there that you are going to want to be considering, despite the fact that there is only 4 teams. That's Man City, Forest and Brentford, teams that have very good players in FPL. Of course, Man United do still have Bruno Fernandes, who could be a big differential because not really too many people are talking about him this week. A really good game against West Ham. Obviously they are still in the Europa League and they are going to be heavily focused on that Europa League charge, and the fixtures aren't too great, playing against Chelsea, who are one of the best defences of recent game weeks, and Villa as well, who are actually really good as well in recent weeks. But the main ones we are going to be focusing on is Brentford, Forest and City. From City, of course, Haaland, De Bruyne, Vardiol is probably going to be a really good triple up that you can get, and of course Marmoush as well, who most of us should already own. From Forest, you've got Chris Wood, you've got Nico Williams. We are going to talk a little bit more about him in a little minute, and I think Gibbs White is going to be your triple up if you really want 3 Forest players for the run out. I think Wood, Gibbs White and Williams is going to be the best. And then for Brentford, Mbeumo and Wissa, everyone's kind of started to get them in recent weeks. They do look really nice, and they've probably got the best run in towards the end of the season, with Fulham at home again as well, and then away to Wolves in game week 38. So really nice fixtures for those 3 teams. Out of those, players that we have just mentioned, you probably are going to want to be looking to transfer a couple of them in, because they do have good fixtures this week and their running until the end of the season is actually looking pretty decent. Now, I'm heavily considering a Forest player for my team personally, with a couple of transfers in the bank, and I was taking a look and seeing really who is going to be the best one to go for. Now, we've got minutes, XG, XA, shots on target, and key passes. Just comparing all of the better Forest players to see who looks like the best option. So we've got the stats of 4 players. We've got Wood, Gibbs White, Williams, and Elanga. For the record, Nico Williams is by far looking like the best attacking defender for Nottingham Forest. So if you want a defender for Leicester at home, who obviously are not a very good attack, I think Nico Williams is easily the best pick that you can go for, but we've got a couple other options in here as well. So out of the last 5 matches, it is Nico Williams with the most minutes. Now you've got to consider that Chris Wood was out injured as well for, I believe, one of these matches, so he would probably be quite far up there as well, into the 400s at least. Obviously, Gibbs White not too far behind as well. When it comes to expected goals, of course, Chris Wood is going to be at the top, being the striker, but Gibbs White is not too far behind. Again, has played an extra game though. We've also got Nico Williams again with a really nice XG for a defender. 0.46 is very respectable. And when it comes to the XA, expected assists, he is the top of all of our players. So, good XG, fantastic XA out of the Forest players, and good minutes as well. And then when you look at the shots, he's actually got the joint most shots with Gibbs White, with 9 shots in the last 5 games. Only 1 on target, so that's not really too ideal, but he takes a lot of shots as a defender, and if he's going to pick up goals, even better. And obviously we are hoping for that clean sheet, but something to keep in mind, Forest actually have not been a very good defence in the last couple of weeks. They've actually been a worse defence than Southampton when it comes to expected goals conceded over the last 5 matches, so something to be wary of if you are really heavily focused on getting a Forest player in for this hopeful clean sheet against Leicester. Obviously it is Leicester, they are one of the worst attacks by far in the league, but Forest haven't really been too great, too solid as they were, in earlier parts of the season. Now, Alanga is also by far the most clinical of all of our Forest players. Out of his 6 shots that he's taken in the last 5 matches, 5 of them have been on target. Compare that to Chris Wood and Gibbs White, the other attackers. Only 1 of Chris Wood's 5 shots have been on target. 1 shot on target in his last 5 matches, or 4 for Wood because he missed a game. Isn't really too great. Obviously Gibbs White as well, only 2 shots on target in his last 5 matches isn't ideal either. So Alanga, a little bit less minutes, not really up there with the XG, but he is still, a very clinical forward. If he gets a chance, it is probably going to go on target. Then when we go to key passes as well, again, all fairly close, 4, 5 and 6, but Williams again is right up there. So I think, personally, if I was going to be picking a Forest player this week, it would be Nico Williams, because of that clean sheet chance, and he just looks like a really nice option attacking wise for a Forest defender. So these are the transfers that I'm possibly looking at making this week. Now, this is all going to be very dependent on whether Haaland is going to be starting. I'm going to hope for some leaks before the deadline and make these moves. Now, I'm really taking out, some big FPL players here. Saliba's coming out, Isak's coming out, but I think I really need at this point, with 3 game weeks to go, to start taking some risks if I want to, really get at least a respectable rank by the end of the season. Now, Saliba's coming out because I really would look to be benching him over the next 2 matches, and I really would be looking at the Southampton match in game week 38 as the only time I would play him from now until the end of the season. Now, that's going to get me Erling Haaland, that's going to free those funds up, and I really like him. Again, I mentioned him already. I don't think that a lot of people are going to be bringing him in until the end of the season, and me bringing him in against Southampton, I think I would be sticking the captaincy armband on him as well, and if that goes well, we're talking a really, really big differential here that a lot of people aren't going to be owning, and he's very capable of getting a lot of goals in that match as well. So Saliba would be moving to Nico Williams. I think despite the Forest, the doubts over the clean sheet, I still think he's going to be a really good pick. Again, Forest have good matches until the end of the season as well, so he could be a nice, cheap option that can play in those matches. Now, Isak is going to be coming out as well. Now, he's playing against Chelsea this week and Arsenal next week, who are the 2 best defences in the last 5 matches. So I'm going to be backing against them. Like I said, I don't think it is the best option in the world. Ideally, I would be able to keep him, but I think to afford Erling Haaland, I think it's a viable option to go against him this week with 2 of the best defences in the league in his next 2 matches. And I can always bring him in again in game week 38 if I can save up some transfers. I can build up some more budget and bring him back for that match against Everton at home in game week 38, which is another option for me. I just think it is very viable, to take Isak out this week if it is an essential move, which for me at this point to afford Haaland, it does feel like it. And then I've got a -4 with Mateta coming out for Evanilson. Now, like I said, I wanted to bring Wissa in last week for Mateta, and Mateta dropped in price last night, which means I was literally 0.1 off being able to bring in Wissa. Ideally, Mateta would be going to Wissa this week, and again, I would have been able to do it last week, or I would have exactly what I wanted if I had made that transfer last week, but I did wait on the information, and unfortunately I have been punished for doing that, but it is what it is. I've got Evanilson, who is playing against Leicester at home in the final game of the season, so I think he could do really well in that, and he's playing against Aston Villa at home this week. Now, Villa have been pretty decent as of last week, the last weeks defensively, but obviously Bournemouth are still fighting for Europe, playing as the striker, and he's got a very, very good XG stat as well in recent weeks, Evanilson does, so I think he could do well. He is a cheap option, I would rather have Wissa in there, but I think he's good enough, and he plays against Man City away from home next week. He is just going to be benched for that fixture as well, so ideally that would be Wissa in that position, but I've got to work with what I've got, and Evanilson is definitely the best option available. So those transfers give me a team that looks like this. We have the triple up of Man City. We've got Vardiol, Marmoush and Haaland. Now ideally Marmoush does just start at left wing and Haaland starts up front. I am taking a big risk in captaincy, and of course I have sold Isak, who is, you know, our best captain according to stats this week if you watched this week's best captaincy video. So a big risk is going to have to be taken this week, and hopefully Haaland is going to be starting in that match. If it is, you know, confirmed that he ends up on the bench, I probably will just move it to Mbeumo, who is a very capable captain as well. But I'm really liking the team. I'm hoping that Marmoush and Haaland can, you know, get a couple of goals between them and really, you know, punish Southampton this week, but we'll wait and see. Still got a very strong midfield. Salah is capable against Arsenal, and Mbeumo and Bowen, obviously really good form between them both. Sarr is another one who I probably would have liked to sell. I think ideally I would have Eze in that position, but again, it is what it is. They're playing against Spurs, who have just played in the Europa League, so I'm hoping it's a bit, you know, a tired legs kind of situation. The same with Munoz, and hopefully both of them can do quite well in that match. Nico Williams coming in for the hopeful clean sheet against Leicester, and hopefully he can get a goal as well, which would be really ideal as well. And then we're stuck with Raya in goals. I just think he's a better option than Verbruggen. You know, Brighton aren't very good defensively, so I feel like just keeping Raya till the end of the season is probably what's going to be happening. And that's basically it for this week. So we've got no transfers left in the bank, and we're obviously taking a -4 to try and get some big points from Erling Haaland. So let me know down in the comments what you're going to be doing this week. Do you want to go for Haaland, or are you just going to go safe, you know, maybe go for De Bruyne, who is going to be off penalties now that Erling Haaland is back. So I think his, you know, appeal as an option kind of goes down a little bit, but I think, you know, he's still obviously very capable of getting goals and assists out with those penalties. So let me know down in the comments what you're going to be doing. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you all in the next one.